Pennsylvania. Mr. Reschenthaler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Madam Secretary, on 10 March of 2023, you said, and I quote, "We can all learn from what China is doing," end quote, obviously about the environment. At the time you made that comment, are you aware that 30% of the world's CO2 emissions came from China?
Oh, yes.
Are you aware at the time you made that comment also that that China emits more than the US, the entire EU, and Japan combined?
Oh, yes.
Were you aware when you made that comment that China brings online 2 coal-fired power plants a week?
Absolutely.
Were you aware that China's coal-fired plants generate over 23% of all the energy of the US production combined?
Yes.
I assume you were also aware that China, in the Paris Climate Agreement, is allowed to increase their emissions through 2030.
Yes.
Knowing that you knew all that when you made the comment, would you like to retract your praise for China?
No, my praise for China was on what they are doing to invest in clean energy, even as they are the world's largest emitter. They are the world's largest.
So they're the largest emitter, and we should be studying what they're doing?
They're also the largest investor in clean energy technologies. They invest 4 times more than the United States.
Reclaiming my time. So they're bringing 2 coal-fired power plants online each week, and you're praising that while you're trying to shut down.
No, I'm not praising that.
Plants
I am not praising that, sir.
I was praising
their investment in clean energy and saying we have to learn.
Madam Secretary, your exact quote was, "So we hopefully we can all learn from what China is doing." That sounds like
clean energy, sir. On clean energy,
let's talk about,
they invest 4 times more than the United States, the greatest investor in clean energy.
Despite the fact that they're the world's largest emitter and they're increasing their emissions.
They have a terrible record on greenhouse gas emissions. They have an investment that is
I also want to talk about a comment you made on 14 October 2021. You said the USA doesn't have, and I quote, "doesn't have the moral authority," end quote, to criticize China. When you made that comment, were you aware that in January of that year, our own State Department determined that the CCP is committing genocide and human rights abuses against Muslim Uyghurs?
Yes, but
were you aware of Hong Kong and the fact that Hong Kongers lost their liberty, and if you're accused of crimes, you're extradited to mainland China?
I'm aware that China is a huge
Are you aware that the PRC
abuser.
is engaged in severe repression of Tibet's unique religious, cultural, and linguistic heritage, including extrajudicial detentions, disappearances, and torture?
Yes.
Are you aware that PRC is widely alleged to be a major harvester and trafficker of forcibly acquired organs?
Yes.
Are you aware that those that have their organs forcibly removed are typically minorities, including Falun Gong, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Muslims, and Christians?
Yes, I'm aware that China is a horrible, huge human rights abuser.
So I find it even more astounding that you say that the United States does not have the moral authority to criticize China when you're aware of this laundry list of human rights violations I just provided you.
That was not the subject I was referring to, sir.
You were still talking about the moral authority with the U.S. vis-a-vis China.
The United States has to learn about and has been actually, about the strategy that China has engaged in to be able to take supply chains for clean energy and corner the market on them. And in passing the Inflation Reduction Act, the response to China has been, we are making the United States irresistible. We are adopting.
All right, I'm going to reclaim my time. I'll submit the exact quote
I do not like to be taken out of context, sir.
I'm not taking you out of context.
Yes, you are, sir. You are absolutely taking me out of context.
I've got 2 quotes with you praising China. One, saying that we don't have the moral authority to criticize China after I just gave you a litany of human rights violations.
I was not referring to that,
Madam
sir.
Secretary, it's my time. I also gave you a quote. I gave you the dates of the quote in which you were praising China for how they're handling energy, and you just admitted they're the largest CO2 emitter, and they're increasing their CO2 emissions. Where's your praise for the United States and the fact that we're the only
I have
Western
been praising
power,
the United States.
We're reducing our emissions through natural gas.
How fantastic it is that we are now in the game. The largest investment in clean energy that was passed last year was thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act.
For the CCP to be alarming, but I'm going to yield the remainder of my time to my colleague from Oregon.
Minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. And thank you, Secretary Granholm, for being here today. I want to circle back in your response to Rep. Guest. You mentioned that there is a focus on investment in critical minerals across the country. Can you talk a little bit about how You're planning to address the issue with permitting and opposition or delays to permitting for new mining facilities. This seems to be a big topic of conversation. And if you, in fact, want to ensure that we have access to these critical minerals, the permitting process seems very antiquated and delayed, and I don't know how we get past that and move forward quickly.
Well, I hope that Congress can help us on this as well, because you are right. It should not take 5 years, 10 years.
How is Congress going to help? Because typically these permitting processes are going through agencies.
And it does come through agencies, but the permitting bill that, or a version of a permitting bill that's being considered, I'm hopeful will help us to address the slowness of how permitting, because often there are conflicting agencies weighing in on their equities. It takes all sorts of understandable input to make this happen. I think that there are ways, as I say, to make sure that the input is garnered, that the environment is protected, but for us also to move with alacrity. I mean, we should be able to do this, and therefore it's going to require some additional help, I think, from Congress. Although I will say we are, with the equities that are happening on the executive branch side, people are trying to move more quickly. And but nobody can deny that it takes too long to get stuff permitted.
And would you agree that also that applies to things like LNG facilities that we're trying to get launched and move forward as well? This permitting process across the board is broken, correct?
I mean, LNG terminals, there are, I was mentioning before, I'm not sure if you were here on that we have permitted 49 BCF worth of export terminals, and we are right now at record levels of export at about 13 BCF. Under construction, up to about 20 BCF. So we have a huge amount already permitted. So LNG is a little bit less of an issue than these other projects that might be happening, for example, on public lands, whether it's clean energy or extraction for mines, et cetera. There's just, transmission. We have a permitting problem.
I want to pivot to one of the line items in the budget, and that is the establishment of a new national laboratory. It's a $35 million request for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. One of the things that Congress has is power of the purse, and as a committee that is overseeing your organization, can you tell me how we are to be sure that this new laboratory that you're requesting funding for is not duplicative?
Yeah, this our goal on this laboratory is to really help to expand our pipeline of people who are interested in working in STEM, in the STEM fields. And so to be able to have a lab that draws from minority-serving institutions, from HBCUs, et cetera, that was what the president promised when he ran for office, and this is a way to make that real. We want the workforce issues in all of our labs are very real. We have a lot of work to do on getting a full pipeline of workers, and especially diverse workers and women workers as well. So we want to be able to use this as a mechanism to create a lab to get people in on understanding the technologies associated with renewable energy, with energy efficiency, et cetera, and have to be able to draw them for a permanent workforce.
Aren't there already programs through the Department of Education that are focused on STEAM and STEM education, particularly for minority and/or diversity groups across the country, particularly with higher ed?
Yes, there are programs.
So how can we be sure that this is not an additional ask?
This is in the context of a national lab setting, which for folks who've been associated with national labs and the internships associated with them, see the amazing access they have to the tools, et cetera, that only a national lab can provide. So it's very specific to this set of workforce needs. We need nuclear engineers. We need nuclear scientists. We need researchers in very advanced basic research fields. So it's very high level.
I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, but my concern is that you have so much research going on. As a matter of fact, I came to this hearing from a science, space, and technology hearing where there is a huge amount of research across the country happening at our higher ed institutions, and particularly, as you mentioned, HBCUs, particularly focused on STEAM and STEM. So I have concerns that another entity, another agency funding that is doing something very similar to other entities across the country may not be the best use of taxpayer dollars. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mrs. Bice. At this time, I would like to recognize another new member to the full committee and to this distinguished subcommittee.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary Granholm, I just one follow-up question. I asked a question about Microvast, a company that we've shown tied to the Chinese Communist Party, the one here with a hammer and sickle on the announcement. And I had mentioned that there's a $200 million award from your department. You had said in this morning that it was not an award. Well, your own website does say it's an award. It says it awards $2.8 billion to 20 companies to manufacture batteries. Your website, yours, goes on to say that the companies will receive a combined $2.8 billion, and the website lists Microvast as one of the 20 companies who will receive the money. So which is it? Is the website wrong, or are you misleading? So is the website misleading the public, or are you trying to mislead the committee here today?
When all decisions are made on grant recipients, they get a letter that says this is the boilerplate we have, and that Microvast and all others got. Receipt of this letter, which notifies them of their selection, does not authorize the applicant to commence with the performance of the project. DOE makes no commitment to issue an award and assumes no financial obligation with the issuance of this letter. Applicants do not receive an award until award negotiations are complete and the contracting officer executes the funding agreement. Only an award document signed by the contracting officer obligates DOE to support a project. All of the recipients understand that it is an initial step, and in this case, all of them have undergone additional vetting and are undergoing additional vetting to make sure that we are protecting the taxpayer dollars.
So then it's your website that is misleading the public, not you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, last fall, the parents and students at Jana Elementary in the greater St. Louis area, Florissant, Missouri, the Hazelwood School District, learned that their school was potentially contaminated by radioactive waste dating back to the Manhattan Project, as verified by independent third-party testing. This was in October of last year. The school was subsequently shut down. The kids were sent home. For months, they weren't in school at all. It was distance learning, which, as one parent said at a school board meeting, is not learning at all. Then they were bused to other school districts, which is currently happening now. The school is still closed. The kids have been given no permanent reassignments. They're being bused to all of these different districts. There's been no cleanup of the site whatsoever. The parents and the school board have repeatedly asked for testing by the United States government and cleanup. They have written to the Department of Energy. They have written to the Army Corps of Engineers. I have written to these agencies. I've written to the president multiple times asking for a government response to this government contamination. I asked your deputy secretary about this in February. He had no answers. I asked the assistant secretary last month. She had no answers. So I'm going to try you now that you're here. I assume you're briefed on this issue. Let's just start with this. On January 23rd, the school board wrote to your department and requested a site eligibility evaluation of all school district properties. Have you responded to them?
Yes, we did.
And what did you say?
We responded. First, let me just say, totally understand the significance of the parents' concerns here. Obviously, we don't want any school children to be going to school where there may be a risk of radiation. As you're probably aware, and as we said in the letter to them, that in 1997, Congress transferred the administration and the execution of formerly utilized sites remedial action program, FUSRAP, to the U.S. Army Corps. And that, it's my understanding, they have been doing testing, and they are the ones who have the responsibility and the jurisdiction for management of FUSRAP activities. It's only when a site has been totally cleaned up and finished that it comes over to our environmental management.
The Army Corps, as I'm sure you're aware, says the opposite. They have directed the school district to your agency. They have said, which is why the school board wrote to you on January 23rd. The Army Corps said they needed additional authorization from the Department of Energy, which is why they wrote to you. That is what they have told me as well. They can't do additional testing. They can't do any cleanup without additional authorization. They have pointed us to you. This is what I said to your Deputy Secretary in February. This is what I said last month. I have not gotten any responses from anybody, not from your department, not from the administration, nobody. I'm sure you can appreciate the deep frustration doesn't quite do it. These kids have been potentially exposed to radioactive waste in their school. The testing found it in the dust particles in the school itself, and now they can't go to school, and for months now, they have gotten complete runaround from this administration. The Army Corps says it's DOE's fault. DOE says, oh, it's the Army Corps' fault. Nobody will do anything. So what are you going to do?
Well, I'm going to follow up with the Army Corps because it's my understanding that they understood that it's in their jurisdiction, and if you're telling me something different, then I have to go back and follow up. So,
Well, what are you going to do for the kids to get this school
let me
reopened?
follow up
Will you
on it.
designate it as a new FOSREP site? You could designate the school under the Memorandum of Understanding. You can designate the school and the school district as a FOSREP site. Will you do that?
let me go back and check if I can, because it's my understanding it was not under our jurisdiction. It would not be until all cleanup is done. So let me follow up.
Okay. It is April. This happened in October. The school is still closed. The parents don't have any answers. Listen, I am dead serious about this. Until we get answers for these kids and until we get that school reopened and cleaned up, I'm going to hold every nominee to your department and every piece of legislation. I'm going to do the same thing with regard to the Army Corps. They have gotten the runaround, frankly, for years. This radioactive contamination's in the creek water that runs right by the school. This community has gotten the runaround for years. And just because it's a community of working people and doesn't have big class donors who give big money to politicians doesn't mean they can be ignored. And they have been ignored for literally decades, and now they've been ignored for months. And I'm not going to stand for it. So I'll stand in the way of anything and everything I have to until we get solutions and results. So you come back to me as soon as you can, but until we get some results here, I'm going to stand in the way until these kids get answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Hickenlooper.
Part of that would like to be engaged.
Great.
Thank you. I yield.
I take privilege one more time. Madam Secretary, I just want to correct. I just really want to correct this, okay?
Okay?
Forget about the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Just forget about it, because this is what we passed. This is the bill. And this is what you all broke the law by advising, referring back to the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Had nothing to do. This is the IRA we passed. Inflation Reduction Act tells you exactly what your manufacturing credits will be and what they're going to be based on. That's all I'm saying. Follow the law.
Well, we have no incentive, I would say.
I know you don't.
No.
Why did you
we have no
all pick
incentive
from the
to
bipartisan?
rewrite the law, is what I was
Why
saying.
did you all refer to that when it was very clear this is the law? This is what manufacturing is.
I think there is a difference of opinion among the lawyers about what the actual definition is.
It depends on who's paying the lawyers. I'm so sorry. I get so worried. I am so upset about this because they're doing everything they can to bust the budget, what we promised American people, what that bill would cost. That's what I'm upset about. And the games that we've played for many years is that we've had debt financing because we run out of money, but we still continue to do what we said that was the intent of the bill. That's what has screwed this country up and put $31.4 trillion. I'm determined to stop that. And this was the bill. Okay, let's go on. That's enough of that. Senator King, it's your turn.
Are you sure?
I hope.
Direct the Army Corps to clean up the school, that would direct testing of the entire school district and create in the Department of Energy a fund to clean up schools that are contaminated by Manhattan-era project contamination. Would you support that legislation? I would. Oh, good. I'm going to try to pass it next week, so I appreciate that. On a different subject here briefly, let me ask you about some disturbing ethics reports related to your department. This is from the Wall Street Journal. U.S. ethics officials in recent years have warned 1/3 of the Energy Department's senior officials own stock related to the agency's work. More than 130 officials in the Energy Department collectively reported about 2,700 trades of shares, bonds, and options in companies that ethics officers labeled as related to the agency's work. Do you own individual stocks, Madam Secretary?
No, I'm invested in mutual funds.
Good. So this report from CNBC last year that said that you violated stock disclosure law 9 times, that's not accurate?
I did fail to file a report in my first year that I thought was supposed to be filed at the end of the year and had to have been filed 3 months earlier. So I was late. That was a...
And this was, you don't own any individual stock now, so maybe you did when you first came and you converted them to mutual funds?
This was, yeah, it totally was the sale of what I had because I'm not owning individual stocks.
I understand. I don't own an individual stock either for the same reason. My question to you then is, do you think that other senior members of your department or any department in the executive branch should own individual stock? Why shouldn't we just ban that like we ought to ban it for members of Congress?
I leave it to Congress. I think it's easier when you don't own individual stocks. However, we do have disclosure rules and a very rigorous ethics agency inside of the Department of Energy. If somebody owns an individual stock and they work in the NNSA and that stock happens to relate to something over in the EERE and they're not involved in it at all, it's not considered an ethics violation.
What do you say about the report that 130 officials in the department collectively traded 2,700 shares of stock?
All of that has been vetted through
And is okay?
because they're not trading in areas where they have any influence or are touching.
But the report is that these are companies, for instance, 28 Energy Department officials own stock in Exxon, 17 officials own stock in Chevron, 15 hold stock in both.
And they may not be doing anything related to fossil fuel. It may just be part of their portfolio.
Boy, that looks
bad.
bad.
It doesn't involve or influence in any way our actions.
It doesn't influence
not.
their actions?
It
Owning the
absolutely
individual
does not.
stock doesn't? Then why did you sell yours?
Absolutely does not, because I signed an ethics agreement with the President of the United States saying I would divest.
Well, presumably because he was rightly worried that owning these individual stocks would influence your decisions, don't you think?
Well, it's different when you're the head of a department and you have a whole agency.
Versus
when
the
you're in
regulator.
one part of an agency and you trade a stock that happens to be dealing with a completely other part. We have 100,000 people in the department, a very vast agency, and they're strewn about the country. If somebody over in NNSA buys some stock over that in Exxon, it doesn't involve their particular area of influence, and that's the influence part, I think, that you're objecting to.
Well, so I guess I don't understand your position. Your position is you're not concerned about 130 officials in the Energy Department collectively trading 2,700 shares of stock, including in Chevron, Exxon, and others?
I would be concerned if our ethics office was concerned, but they have reviewed all of the investments and all of these disclosure agreements, and the people who are doing individual stock trading are not involved in any decision-making related to a stock that they purchased.
Well, I tell you what, I think I've got a solution, which is let's just ban it. Let's ban it for all executive department officials. Let's ban it for members of Congress. How about that?
I would not object to that.
I think that I am it. So you'll be happy to know, Madam Secretary, that we're grateful for you being here. Members will have until the close of business tomorrow to submit additional questions for the record, and the committee stands adjourned.
Great. Thank you.
Secretary. Senator Barrasso.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, I'd like just to follow up on some of your questioning that you've been doing in terms of manufacturing and materials and the important things there, because last year this department announced it would make a $200 million grant to Microvast. At the time, more than 60% of Microvast's revenue came from China when you made the announcement, only 1% from the United States. In discussing its products, Microvast CEO bragged that I'm honored that this is a technology we developed here in China. In fact, and I have a sign here, the local branch of the Chinese Communist Party successfully recruited Microvast CEO to return from the United States to China under their talent program. They said, yeah, he returned from the United States with $3 million. They have the program to attract people from China back to China who have been in the United States. The CEO is a participant in the Chinese Communist Party talent program. You can see the hammer and the sickle up there in yellow, and the Department of Energy is announcing a big grant to them. So in February, at this same table, Deputy Secretary Turk told our committee that despite the grant announcement, that despite the hammer and sickle, in spite of that, no final decision has yet been made on funding the Chinese-backed company. Can you assure us today that you will not go forward with $200 million, an award to Microvast or any other company under such significant Chinese influence?
I can assure you that we are very vigilant about making sure that no taxpayer dollars goes to any state-owned enterprise or Chinese-influenced company. That particular award is still under negotiation, and we'll get back to you on the final conclusions on that. That is, it was a selection, by the way. It wasn't an award. As with all DOE awards that eventually get money, they are started out as a selection, and they go through a negotiation process. And all awardees are told that nothing is final until the vetting and the negotiation is over. You're probably aware, I think he may have mentioned, that we have instituted, as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the IRA and the new funding coming through the department, we've instituted a whole new vetting process for these companies, including in partnership and guided by CFIUS, so that we can protect taxpayer dollars both now and into the future.
And in terms of not just evaluation, perhaps when you make the announcement, that ought to be under investigation too by your own group to say, we're not going to announce something that could cause this sort of concern by members on both sides of the aisle on this committee. Moving on to another issue. Over the past few years, the Biden administration has aggressively pushed back against the idea that COVID could have emerged from the Wuhan lab. But earlier this year, scientists at your department, the Department of Energy, determined that a lab leak is most likely the origin of COVID-19. Did you agree with your own agency experts that COVID was most likely leaked from the Chinese lab?
The intelligence community found that with low confidence because there is conflicting reports and a conflicting opinion within the IC community.
Well, the President signed into law a bipartisan bill directing the administration to declassify information on COVID's origin. So will you make public the relevant information supporting the department's scientists finding that COVID originated from a lab leak?
Yes, as soon as the Director of National Intelligence makes the determination that our sources and methods are protected.
Because you agree that the American people do have a right to the information.
I know that Congress passed a law and the President signed it.
Okay. The auto efficiency. The department is right in the middle of the EPA's attempt to regulate the internal combustion engine out of existence. The administration won't stop until everything's electrified. We'll then be more dependent on China and Russia for materials that go into batteries and solar panels and wind turbines. So do you think electric vehicles really are the right choice for every driver? And why is the Biden administration trying to ban cars and trucks the people of Wyoming need to drive to go from point A to point B in our large state?
The administration is not trying to ban anything. The administration, through the EPA, is trying to reduce emissions. And the emissions can be best reduced through electrification. That might be through a battery electrification. That might be through fuel cell. But there is not any effort to ban vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles. We do know that's the largest source, of course, of greenhouse gas emissions, providing 30% of the source of emissions. And we all, I think everyone agrees that we need to, as a nation, continue to move toward efficiency, and that rule will do this.
So price of gasoline, I know you're very familiar with the price of gasoline. Its average price today, $3.68. It's up about 25 cents a gallon from a month ago. So leading up to the election, you as the Secretary of Energy and this administration released massive amounts of oil, over 1 million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, so that the reserve, our emergency supply, is now at the lowest level since 1984, and gas prices are on the way up. What's your next trick to try to deal with the relief that the American people need as the price goes up?
It is clear that supply, the amount of oil produced, affects how much people pay at the pump. The challenge is that oil is traded on a global market. And so when Russia invades Ukraine and barrels are pulled off, there's a supply disruption. which is why the president wanted to use, in the case of war, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to stabilize and reduce prices, but really to provide the supply necessary to stabilize the global market as well. That was successful. The latest increase is a result of OPEC's move to pinch supply, to increase their funds, their budgets. It is another reason why it is important to continue to accelerate, honestly, the move to electrification so that we can have, we don't have to rely on volatile sources. And also, the president has called upon our domestic oil and gas producers to continue to increase supply as well. Both need to happen.
So then one of your recommendations is to actually drill more American oil, build more pipelines, make it easier and cheaper to produce American oil.
We have called upon the oil and gas industry to increase production so that people are not hurt at the same time as we want to accelerate toward clean energy solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One more Democrat discriminating against Republicans. You know what I'm saying? That's all I can say.
Senator Cassidy, you snuck in, brother. You sure did.
Thank you. You're a king among men. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. Madam Secretary, when we spoke with Deputy Secretary Turk some time ago, at issue was the definition of clean hydrogen that DOE has proposed. We were very specific in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that should be about at the point of production, and yet the Department of Energy has made it a life cycle definition. How could, I mean, like, tell me, you weren't supposed to do that. You're going against Congress's explicit direction. So can you comment on how you felt you had the latitude to specifically go against that which Congress had directed?
The definition, I know, is about low emissions, right? And so the question about whether it's point or life cycle, I know has been significantly worked within the department. Maybe it would be helpful for us to sit down with the head of our joint strategy team on.
That would be great.
So
Please,
that we can
because
talk through that.
Because my office helped draft that, and
Yeah.
we were very particular.
Okay.
And the law particularly states the way that we particularly wished it to particularly say. So as we speak about particulate matters or whatever else, you see where I'm going with that.
Let us particularly sit down and figure that out.
Also, in the IRA, let's see, here. Earlier, Senator Manchin asked you about a definition you provided to Treasury for battery manufacturing and processing. Now, the DOE decided to change the definition in the IRA and effectively undercut domestic producers, directly affecting projects such as the Sierra project in Louisiana. So again, it seems like they're changing definitions that were explicitly defined by Congress. Is that something else we should meet upon?
Well, we certainly can, but the definition of how the DOE has recommended to Treasury was directly from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which had a definition of processing in there. They didn't want to go back and redo what Congress had just passed. So they used for the IRA the same definition as was in the bill.
So have I been misinformed? Because it's my understanding that the rule that DOE put out, the definition that DOE put out, was different than the one explicitly stated.
No, I think what Senator Manchin was referring to was that there was a grant that was given in the battery grants to a company under manufacturing, and that's the provision that they applied under. We didn't move them around. They would have qualified under either being a processor or a manufacturer. We left them where they were, but we didn't redo the definition.
Okay. Now, going on, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, or OSED, is supposed to help establish demonstration projects. It's missing deadlines all over the place. It really is. Initially announced and then changed by a DOE. A deadline set forward in the infrastructure bill, changed, and then again missed. We can send you chapter and verse on that. The OSED budget, though, wants more funding to go after projects not authorized in the Energy Act or the infrastructure bill. And so it just, if you're not accomplishing the task set before you by law and you want more responsibility and more money, that just doesn't seem to kind of, it seems inconsistent.
Well, they have been working incredibly hard to get all of these programs and the funding for them out. I'm not sure which ones deadlines were missed, so I'd
send you
like to-
back up on that.
Well, yeah, that would be great. But they are going to be a center of excellence within the department on large-scale demonstration projects, which is something the Department of Energy hasn't done in the past. They've done small-scale demonstrations, but these are large-scale projects like the hubs, direct air capture hubs.
Big responsibility, which I guess is begging the question why they want additional responsibilities.
Well, what we want to have them do is to make sure they have the skill sets as well as the ability to, on a long-term basis, advise other arms of the department on these major demonstration projects to be the center of excellence. So we're really proud of what they're doing. And
Last question, just because I'm out of time. I understand the department has met with LNG exporters about a clean gas standard in order to measure methane emissions. Can you tell us about the nature of the conversations and the major themes discussed, the next steps, the specifics that buyers are looking for as regards cleanliness of U.S. gas?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it is important that when we do exports, particularly of LNG, but also, gas that's inside the United States, that we button down our methane. And I think the industry believes that as well, because it's a waste to have methane vented. So the question is, how do you do that in a way that certifies that this is this is gas, where they've taken care of that methane, the methane emissions? Is there an independent entity, for example, that's trusted by all to be able to help certify that? And those are the kinds of discussions we're having. It's still in the formulative stage, and we're happy to talk with you about input, but we are meeting with industry to make sure that we get it right.
Yeah, I look forward to that and would like to be engaged.
Great.
Thank you, I yield.
Thank you for yielding back, and we'll go to Ms. Lesko from Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Secretary Granholm, for coming here today. I've seen one analysis that shows that DOE will spend at least $150 billion over the next 5 years, maybe significantly more. In your budget request, you use the term equity 137 times. President Biden issued an executive order directing the federal government to spend money that is, quote, consistent with applicable law to allocate resources to address the historic failure to invest sufficiently, justly, and equally in underserved communities, unquote. You have been directed to spend $150 billion by Congress. Will you provide to this committee the specific applicable law passed by Congress that allows these dollars to be spent in a manner to address the historic failure to invest sufficiently, justly, and equally in underserved communities?
One of the laws is through the Inflation Reduction Act. There is a low-income adder that allows for, it's an additional incentive, a 10% incentive for those who are building out solar, for example, facilities to locate in communities that have been disproportionately affected, perhaps by negatively by pollution, or have been a disadvantaged community economically.
DOE's Justice 40 initiative requires 40% of spending to go towards disadvantaged communities. Can you provide me with a specific applicable law passed by Congress that allows such a massive quota system?
It is a goal. It's Justice 40, that 40% should be directed to communities that have been left behind, that have not had the benefit of the investments that other communities have. So we are trying to achieve that goal, and part of that is through community benefit agreements associated with the grants that we are providing under the bipartisan infrastructure law. We want those who are investing to be able to consult with communities to make sure that there is a workforce strategy.
So you say it's in the infrastructure law?
Infrastructure law and the
language.
Inflation Reduction Act both provide incentives for locating facilities in disadvantaged communities.
Madam Secretary, you, I think, already know that I'm sponsoring a bill, Save Our Stoves, Gas Stoves Act. So far, we have 55 co-sponsors, and it has bipartisan support. and 29 of my Democratic colleagues voted for a similar amendment. In fact, it was the same language on H.R. 1 to save our gas stoves. I wrote a letter with 70 other members and submitted our comments for the record on your rulemaking that would ban gas stoves and effectively ban gas stoves in America. I think it's unfortunate that we have to introduce a bill to reverse an unnecessary anti-consumer choice rule by Department of Energy. On DOE's website, it states, it claims that the federal government is banning gas stoves are absurd. Yet, here are the facts that I know. DOE's first approach was to set a requirement of the proposed rule at max tech requirements, which DOE itself said would eliminate 96% of the products available today. Setting a max tech requirement has never been done before for household appliances. After pushback, it appears that DOE revised their information and subsequently determined half of the products would be eliminated from the market. It appears DOE pulled this number, quite frankly, out of thin air. I don't know where you got it from. They started counting products on a website that looked like products it tested. DOE, of course, has no actual basis for knowing if the products it found meet its proposed standard because it did not test them. To date, DOE provides no data or substantiation for how it determined the models on retailer websites would meet its proposed standards. This proposed rule puts at risk at least 1,000 manufacturing jobs in just one company in Arizona. And quite frankly, it eliminates consumer choice. According to DOE's own estimate, the rule will save only $21.89 per stove over a 14-year period, or $1.50 per year, or 12 cents a month. And then DOE said somehow that equates to a saving of $1.7 billion. Finally, the projected gas emissions reduction is equivalent to about 8 hours of Chinese coal plant emissions. And so my statement is, why in the world would we want to increase funding for the Department of Energy when it appears that they're going after consumer choice and, quite frankly, Americans? Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Go to Ms. Schreier for 5 minutes. Thank the gentleman. I'll now go to Mr. Fluker from Texas, 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary. Thank you for being here. Would you consider yourself the principal advisor to the president for energy matters?
I'm the Secretary of Energy. I'm one of the main advisors, but he's got a few.
But you're the principal advisor.
Well, I don't know that I would say that. I think he's got some
Secretary
very
of
good
Energy.
advisors in the White
I
House.
believe in this position. I represent the Permian Basin. We've had this conversation before. We produce about 43% of the country's crude oil. It's the most secure supply of oil and gas in the entire world. And in fact, I would also go a step further, that it's probably the only thing that has kept this economy going, despite the policies that we've seen. Very concerned about those policies, and I just have a couple of questions for you. Based on, being the Secretary of Energy, when the president went to Saudi Arabia and asked OPEC Plus to increase production, was that your recommendation to him to do that?
I think the president wanted to see greater production in the United States also.
We have that ability.
And
That's why
he's
HR
been
1
asking
is so
for it.
important. And Madam Secretary, you are the Secretary of Energy. We are blessed as a country to have the most enormous amount of reserves, not just of oil and gas, but of so many other critical minerals and things that have been discussed today. Did you recommend that he go to Saudi Arabia and ask for them to produce more oil?
I was not in that conversation.
So he did not ask the Secretary of Energy for
I was
your
not in that
recommendation?
conversation. But I will say this, he has been very strong about asking for greater supply here in the United States.
And we have that capacity to do that. I'm extremely troubled with the fact that for a political emergency, the president released over half of our SPR. At what point in time will you make a recommendation to the president or act upon current law to refill?
We will be refilling, as
What's
you're
the time? Do
probably,
you have a timeline?
as soon as we're finished with the current congressionally mandated sale, which we are required to do before the end of the fiscal year. As soon as that's done, because as you're probably aware, you can't take in and release at the same time. We will begin the
I'd like
process.
for you to
of
follow up
refilling.
for the record on that one, to let us know what that timeline looks like. I'm going to move to the next question.
Starting this summer.
You said we cannot flip a switch today, but the administration has actually tried to flip that switch. Just a couple of questions for you when it comes to what's the total amount of electricity that our country needs on an annual basis?
Well, right now, we have about 1,400 gigawatts on our grid.
On an annual basis, what does that equate to?
Well, 1,400 gigawatts on the grid, so how much electricity we have a bunch of different sources of electricity that are provided. We use about three.
It's about 4 trillion kilowatt hours per year. And I would expect you to know that because when we have a 2032 mandate to get to electric vehicles like my colleague just mentioned, my next question is, what will the increase in that total amount of annual
We have to
demand
double
be?
the size of the electric grid by
Double?
2035.
Double. So what portion of our grid is serviced by hydrocarbons right now?
About 40% is natural gas, about 17% is coal, and the rest is clean.
Okay, so it's about 20%, 22% coal,
No,
19% nuclear.
17%. It's as of right now.
This is from y'all's website.
Well,
38% natural gas and 20% renewable. So what, in 2032, if we have to double, and thank you for that answer, that's actually more than I was expecting you to say. If we have to double the amount of electricity, where is that going to come from?
That's going to come from growing our energy pie.
In what pieces
Increasing-
of pie will grow?
We want to increase clean.
Clean, so what does that mean? What does
So
clean?
that means let's increase nuclear. Let's increase hydroelectric power. Let's increase
What about,
geothermal.
what
Let's
about in places
increase.
that don't have hydro?
Well, that's why you have a transmission grid, to be able to bring electricity from where it's generated to where it's needed.
When's the last time you visited the Permian Basin?
I have not been to the Permian
It's the
Basin.
most prolific production area for energy in this country.
Will you invite me?
I have invited you.
I didn't know
I
that.
invited you last year when I saw you in a meeting,
Great.
and I'll invite you again. This area helped us win World War II. This area has lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. This administration is choosing to not use the best of the above strategy. I'm not an all of the above kind of person. I'm a best of the above. And that's different for different places. Hydrocarbons in some places, clean natural gas, maybe if you have hydroelectric. We have more wind energy in my congressional district than the entire state of California. Come see it. It doesn't always work. The wind in West Texas in July when it's 110 degrees in the middle of summer doesn't blow,
But your sun shines.
but it does. And give me a battery that works for more than 4 hours that services the
working on
largest
that.
electric grid in the country.
Yeah.
We don't want to be like Europe. We don't want to be like California. That's why we're trying to use a best of the above approach. My time has expired, but I would like to see, Mr. Chairman, the timeline for when the SPR is going to be refilled. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We'll go to Mr. Carter from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you letting me wave onto this committee. Madam Secretary, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, Madam Secretary, I appreciate you being here. The war in Russia really exposed our energy security vulnerabilities and the danger of relying on adversaries for our energy needs. And I've had numerous conversations with our European allies, and they regret some of the decisions that were made that led them to this place to be dependent, dangerously dependent on Russia natural gas. And they've been pleading with us for years for America to increase our LNG exports. Now, in America, we are blessed with some of the world's largest and cleanest supplies of fossil fuels, the critical minerals for renewables, plentiful supplies for uranium to power our nuclear reactors. But unfortunately, we're falling behind on the processing of those minerals and uranium. China controls more than 90% for renewables and batteries, and the U.S. nuclear fleet imports more than 20% of its enriched uranium from Russia. Reliance on Russian-sourced nuclear fuel has weakened our nuclear fuel infrastructure and now puts our whole nuclear security at risk. Congress imposed a ban on Russian oil and gas imports. Do you support a ban on importing Russian enriched uranium into the U.S. as well?
I would certainly consider that if we have developed our own supply. We want to be energy independent. We don't want to harm the existing fleet, but we want to build up that energy supply, and hopefully Congress
Thank you. I'm going
can
to
work
take
on
back my time, and we need I have a whole bunch of yes or no questions here. Will you commit to working with me on legislation to ban the import of Russian-sourced nuclear fuels?
Again, I would support making sure that our fleet is secure and that we have enough supply, and that means making it here. And I hope we can work together on a uranium strategy that ensures that we can have that for our own fleet.
Yes, and we got to ban natural gas, or we got to ban the nuclear coming from Russia, and then we got to work on getting supply here too. Yes, yes or no? Do you agree that because China controls more than 90% of the critical materials used to make solar panels and batteries, that America is becoming dependent on one supplier, China, for our energy needs?
I think America is becoming more dependent on ourselves because of the investments that were made through the Inflation Reduction Act. The Loan Program Office has just financed several processing.
Nothing's being manufactured yet.
Well,
yes or no?
But it is going to be. It is going to be. That's what's so exciting, all the announcements that have been made about batteries, battery supply chain coming to the
reclaiming my
United
time.
States.
Are you aware that China uses slave labor and is the largest polluter in the world? How many critical mineral processing facilities do we have in the United States?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that we must build more processing in the United States, and that's exactly
Madam Secretary,
what the Inflation Reduction
reclaiming my
Act and
time.
the bipartisan
Let's start with how many
infrastructure
do we
laws
have right now? How many do we have right now?
We just, in fact, the Loan Program Office just financed 3 additional
How many
ones.
existing processing
That's what I'm saying.
facilities?
We have not done that. It has been in Asia. This is exactly why we cannot stand by and allow that to continue. We want to bring, we don't disagree, I don't think. We want to bring processing here and do it here.
Thank you. How long does it take to permit a
Far too
critical
long.
minerals processing facility in the United States?
Far too long, far too long.
How many years?
It takes years. It is
many
ridiculous and
years?
unacceptable.
So how many years?
It
does it
shouldn't
take?
take as long as it does.
How many years?
Let's work on slowing no, excuse me, let's
You
work
don't
on
want to say
speeding
how
up.
many years it takes.
Well,
because
I don't
we're talking
take
about
responsibility for how
years.
many years it takes. It takes too long. It's years, and it shouldn't be. We should be doing it much more quickly.
So it's going to be years, and in the meantime,
unless we do
there's
permitting
no
reform.
processing in the United States of America, which means it all is going to go to China and come back.
That's exactly what we're not going to happen. That's why we have to do permitting reform,
If you
and that's why
don't
we have to
have
continue to
processing
invest.
in the United States of America, it is.
We are
it is-
investing in it right now. That's why all of
Thank
these
you.
new
Thank
battery
you.
companies
Reclaiming
and
my
processors
time.
have announced they're coming.
Reclaiming my time here. Would you support a prohibition on using taxpayer dollars to purchase renewable energy technologies that are manufactured with slave labor?
No.
You won't support a prohibition?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said, would I support? I do not support slave labor making
Okay. Would
solar
you
panels
support a
or us
prohibition
supporting it
on
in any
using
way.
taxpayer dollars to do this, to purchase? Would you support a prohibition on using taxpayer dollars to purchase renewable energy technologies manufactured with slave labor?
Yes.
Would you support a ban on importing renewable energy technologies made with components mined or processed in factories that violate America's environmental standards?
I'd have to look specifically at what you were saying on that, but I want for us to be manufacturing in the United
I do
States.
too.
All the components, the full supply chain for
I do
solar,
too. I
as
do
well
too.
as for
Thank you.
batteries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I think my point is the difference between what the dream is and what reality is. And the reality is it's not happening here. It's happening. We are dependent upon China. And so we can't get the cart before the horse. I yield back.
Julie yields back. I'll now recognize the ranking.
When he yields back, we'll hear next from the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Franklin. You are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. Just a few questions, and I honestly, this is not designed to be a political gotcha. It's just a reality of the world we live in today. But and also because a lot of times, the press gets things different ways. I would like to hear from you, and I apologize if I missed it while I was out at another hearing. But can you attest to the validity or the veracity of the situation you had a few months ago with the trip where you had a staffer that parked in a charging spot to hold a position for you so that you and your entourage could recharge your vehicles? Was that situation true?
Yeah, I've seen the reports.
Well, you were there. I mean, regardless of the report.
I wasn't saving the spot, but let me just say I have a fantastic young staff. Just fantastic.
Well, that's neither here nor there.
I just want to say that somebody made a
Is it true that
mistake.
you had a staffer
in
a gas-powered,
it is
one of
true that a
your
gas- that a-
representatives parked in an electric charging spot to reserve the position for you so that you could do it and not be deterred from your travels? Is that
It was
accurate?
poor judgment on
But it's
the
true,
part
correct?
of the team.
Why do you think, and poor judgment, but why do you think they did that?
I can only imagine they wanted to continue moving, but the bottom line is it's not going to happen again.
Okay. Well, it is interesting that that would happen. I would tell you, I don't personally have an issue with electric vehicles. I think, Teslas are kind of fun. I've enjoyed, as a former carrier pilot, I like the acceleration you get from those. But the reality where I live in Florida, there's not an infrastructure that supports that. But I happened to be in California a week before last. Went to rent my car, go out in the garage, and they tell me you can choose from any vehicle that's out there, pick what you want to drive away. And the only vehicles that were there were electric. And I went and asked the lady, I said, is this all you guys have in your vehicle fleet? She goes, no, actually, we have combustion cars too, but those have all been chosen. Because, not surprisingly to me, people would rather use something that they're familiar with and something that they know that they can get charged up pretty easily. I was there for a day. I had back-to-back meetings the whole time, no time built into my schedule. I wish I had a staffer who could have parked a car in a spot and blocked a station for me. But, all these vehicles were charged. The most charged one I saw was 85%. You have to return the vehicle at more than 70%. So somewhere along the way in my 24 hours that I'm in California, I've got to go find a charging station. I asked about that and was told, well, there's apps for that. You can go online and find out where to go charge it. The technology is not there to support what this administration is doing. But just, to further bolster that a little bit, California now likes to fancy themselves as a leader in the country, but God forbid the rest of the country follow their way. But by 2035, we're going to have 100% electric vehicles. That's 68% by 2030. By 2026, it's going to be 35%. But the reality today, China produces 90 of the batteries that are required for these. China produces 95% of the manganese, 70% of the cobalt and graphite, 66% of the lithium, and 60% of the nickel. The Undersecretary of State, Secretary of State for Economic Growth, Jose Fernandez, had said, in order to meet the goals that we're going to have to do to achieve these targets, we're going to have to increase our production of critical minerals by 6 to 8 times, the amount of lithium production by 42 times, and the amount of graphite by 25 times. With the hurdles we have with regulations to try to get that stuff permitted and done, it's never going to happen. And everybody knows that. And we read stories of the Western auto manufacturers are concerned that these policies are driving auto manufacturing into the arms of the Chinese. It's a reality. They're out ahead of this on us. Good on them for that. But the truth is, and we all know it, that we do not have the ability to meet these timelines. So I'd like to hear from you, what is the game plan to marry up our regulatory environment with the requirements that are coming down the line, so that give me some confidence that these are deadlines that will be made. Because, well, and just with one other point, the average used vehicle, the average age of a vehicle on the road now is 12 and a half years. So vehicles that are, folks in California in just a few years aren't going to be able to drive the cars that are being produced today. I mean, they'll be able to drive them, but as we know, as more of these corners that currently have gasoline available to them are converted to charging stations, it's going to get harder and harder to find fossil fuel to refuel the vehicles. But help assure me that you got a plan that we're not going to drive auto manufacturing into the arms of the Chinese.
Yeah, this is exactly what the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law are all about, which is to create and pull the full supply chain for manufacturing electric vehicles into the United States. And what we're seeing across the country is that it's happening. We've got all these battery manufacturers now in the United States, the supply chain moving to the United States. You're right about extraction of critical minerals.
But excuse me, is that clean? Because the data that I see would indicate that really all you're doing is shifting the pollution from one source to another. I mean, yes, you're going to cut ultimately the carbon emissions coming out from those electric vehicles, But the production of those batteries, the disposal of them, is absolutely as dirty as anything that's coming out of the tailpipes of these combustion engine cars today.
Well,
do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I do, because there is a whole overall strategy to make sure that these are industrial facilities that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that they're built to have lower GHG emissions. And we want to make sure that we are responsibly extracting minerals as well. We obviously want to partner with our allies. We want to recycle as much as we can. We want to find substitute materials, but we also want to do sustainable extraction. We have an old mining law. I think it needs to be upgraded for the moment, and hopefully we can do that in a bipartisan way.
Pardon me, I know we're running short of time, and I'm actually over, but I would love to hear more on the plan on how you intend to work with EPA on that. But I would tell you, in Florida, where electric vehicles explode, catch on fire when they get wet, we have hurricanes. You cannot get out of Florida when a hurricane's bearing down an electric vehicle now. Simply is not possible. It doesn't exist, and we can show you the data. It may work somewhere else, but it's not going to work in Florida anytime soon. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Granholm, for being with us this afternoon. I want to start with a line of questioning that occurred earlier in the hearing from my colleague from California, Mr. Issa, talking about the efficiency standards that are being put forward by the Department of Energy and the impact on consumers. You indicated that there is no push for you to eliminate any of these particular appliances or household items. In fact, you just want to see the efficiency standards increase. But I want to point out a couple of things to you that I think are relevant. In the Federal Register, which details out your review of the efficiency standards for ceiling fans, it is noted that there is a $16.69 savings if the efficiency standards that you are proposing are met, which would have a simple payback of 4.1 years. But what is not talked about in here, by the way, the average ceiling fan lasts 10 years plus, so you're talking $1.69 for a consumer per year that they would save. But what's not being talked about is the impact on the manufacturing of these particular appliances. And in the document, it is stated that it is estimated that the industry would incur conversion costs of $107 million. That is an estimate. So what that translates to is those costs, those increased manufacturing costs, are actually going to be passed on to consumers. So in essence, you're actually going to cost consumers more money by these efficiency standards not reducing their costs. So I want to point that out. I think this is just one example. It happens to many of the other proposals that you put forward for energy efficiencies on gas stoves and refrigerators and washers and dryers, you name it. I want to pivot to a comment that you made earlier about the Office of the Inspector General. Is it correct that you asked for an increase in the IIG budget for '24?
Yeah, I think that this is what was asked for. You know, we obviously support the so the FY24 request included $165 million for the OIG, which was more than double what the 23 enacted was, which was $86 million.
Okay, let me ask this question. Why was that amount not asked for prior? And here's why I ask. The IIJA and the IRA, which were passed previous to this Congress, actually had a incredibly small amount proportionately of money given to the Inspector General for those two programs. And let me give you a little bit of maybe background and numbers. Under the IIJA CHIPS and the IRA, Congress authorized or appropriated $127.5 billion to the DOE and increased the DOE's direct loan guarantee authority by $350 billion. However, both those three programs only appropriated a small amount of the money to the IG to oversee these funds, and you've already begun doling them out and plan to do so over the next 5 years. Why were you not adamant when these programs are being put together and passed in the last Congress by Democrats? Why were you not insisting that more money go to the IG to be able to oversee these programs so that when your organization is doling out these funds, you can ensure that you're not wasting taxpayer money?
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're not wasting.
But you had the opportunity to do that with these bills and didn't. As a matter of fact, IIJA, the percentage of that particular bill going to the Inspector General is 0.1%, and the IRA is 0.05%. When the benchmark is 0.35%.
The money has started to flow, and we've requested double the amount of money, and we want the.
But why did
Inspector
you not
General-
ask for it previous to now?
Well, we're
These
asking
bills were
for
passed a
double
year or two
now.
ago.
I mean, we're asking for double. We support the, the Inspector General.
So you wanna-
And the
you wanna-
Inspector General comes and makes their own case here too, so.
And they have, based on these numbers. You had the ability. Let me also make one other, I think, note here, that there's actually been a request from the Inspector General's office to allow for some additional funding to be transferred to them. House Energy and Water Appropriations Bill has proposed a transfer of unobligated funds to the department, but you haven't supported that transfer. Why are you trying to, hide or not be transparent with taxpayer money?
Can I just say, we requested last year an increase of we requested 107 million, but it was Congress that funded only at 86 million.
But you also had the opportunity to actually put money into these programs initially and didn't ask for that. I think it's troubling that the Department of Energy doesn't want to be transparent with taxpayer money. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Overnolte, and thank you for having this meeting, and thank you, Secretary Granholm, for being here. And I'm going to get into a topic which I know that's not going to be popular, but I think it's really important. And so, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to insert 4 articles into the record detailing Secretary Granholm's various ethics issues and 2 articles from the Department of Energy's website concerning its ethical policies. First, I just want to...
Without exception.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an article from Reuters. U.S. Energy Secretary Granholm violated ethics laws, watchdog says. An article from CNN, Biden touts electric car company potentially worth millions for his energy secretary. From Washington Free Beacon, Energy Secretary's husband held stock in Ford as administration approved billions in electric vehicle subsidies. Next article from Fox News, Biden Energy Secretary Granholm admits false testimony about owning stocks. The next I want to just point out and put these for the record, Mr. Chair, just so people have them. These are ethics, 14 principles of ethical conduct for federal employees. That's right on the Energy website. Ethics, impartiality in performing official duties. Want to be sure
without
that.
objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So since taking office, I know my colleague, Mr. Iser, referred to some of these issues, but since taking office in January of 2021, Secretary Granholm has violated the Hatch Act multiple times. She's owned Proterra stock while her boss, President Biden, repeatedly promoted the company. We saw this huge payout. She admitted 3 months after she took office. Her husband owned Ford stock while she personally promoted the company's work with official resources, and she cashed in on millions of dollars after these illegal transactions, and failure to disclose obvious conflicts were revealed. As you said, it took you 3 months before you actually sold the stock. And most critically, she lied under oath to Congress, claiming she did not own any individual stocks when in fact she did. Anyone disputing these charges could consult to these articles that I put in the record. They're available for everyone. And I just want to go to, Madam Secretary, the DOE's ethical rules or federal employee ethics laws provide that, quote, public service is a public trust. Employees must place loyalty to the Constitution, the laws, and ethical principles above gain, as I cited in the ethical principles that are part of your own department. Do you believe that any Department of Energy or other federal employee violating this rule should resign or be removed from office for this position?
First of all, let me say that we take ethics.
That's a yes or no question. Do you think if someone violates the ethical laws set forth in this, that you said you signed a statement, an ethical statement that you would comply with the laws? Do you think that a DOE employee or other federal employee who violates these laws should step down from that position? That's a yes or no? If they violate the ethics laws set
I
forth
understand
in
what
the-
you're trying to do
Well,
here.
I'm not- I'm
just
asking
trying-
you a
let-
specific
no, but
question. Okay, so
have-
you're not gonna answer the
You
question.
have made a number of allegations that I
I've
feel
put-
against
it's-
me
I'm-
personally.
this is
that
my
I-
time, Mr.
I know,
Mr. Chairman.
but you've
Um,
made these out there, and I feel it is
Let me just
important to
let me just tell
respond.
you, this is what you did not answer the yes or no question. You obviously believe that it's okay to violate the ethics rules.
Of
as
course,
you've
I do
done.
not believe it's
But let's
okay to
just say-
violate ethics laws, nor does anyone else in the
Right,
Department of
so
Energy.
this is my time. So what you're trying to say is afterwards, once I realized and I spoke to Congress that I was not telling the truth about what's happening, I went back and admitted, oh, I made a mistake. So admitting the truth after being caught lying doesn't actually cure perjury. I don't know if you know that legally. I know you're an attorney. So you've admitted to testifying falsely and then came back and said, I corrected it later, but that doesn't cure the fact that you actually committed perjury. We've actually impeached presidents over committing perjury. And this is actually involved in your official duties. Also after signing an ethics oath that you said that you signed and admitted to today, and on top of admitting that it was 3 months after you took office that you actually sold the stock on the private market, as Congressman Issa put out. So to me, that's perjury, and that's simple. That's perjury, period. Why should you not resign, or why should we not consider some kind of impeachment inquiry into you for your perjury charges? We've done that with presidents of the United States in the past.
Number one, I made a mistake when I testified saying that I had sold all stock. I honestly thought we had.
So wait a
but I
minute.
was
So,
wrong.
so I'll reclaim my
So-
time. You're a lawyer. You know that perjury, you cannot go
don't
back
take-
and say I made a mistake. Perjury exists when you give a false statement under oath, which you did.
Oh,
Did you
no,
not?
no, I did not intentionally. I thought we had divested of all stocks. We had
Look,
divested of all.
this is the colossal
conflicting
ego
stocks.
of this administration that people and the American people are frustrated with. You serve the American people. You don't serve President Biden. You don't serve a special interest. You serve the American people.
Of course.
We would appreciate you coming forward on this.
I am coming forward if you would let me explain.
Look,
I made a
appointees with
mistake.
lesser conflicts, honestly, would have withdrawn their nomination or they would resign from office. Thank you. I yield back my.
There's no conflict